All right, thank you for joining us for the very first edition of the DEA Chicago Podcast. I'm Luis Agostini, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the DEA Chicago Field Division. And joining me today is Special Agent in Charge, Sheila Lyons. Boss, thanks for being here.
Of course. Hey, I love this idea. I'm proud to be a DEA agent, proud to be in charge of the Chicago Field Division. DEA has so much to offer in so many arenas and in so many ways. I just think this is a great way to share who we are and what we do.
Especially now in the midst of the fighting to save lives and the opioid epidemic and the proliferation of fentanyl that we're seeing throughout the division and across the country. I think right now it's just vital time to get out the message of what it is that we're doing. And like I said, when we first started floating around the idea for this, really wanted to be a platform where people who are listening, like you said, can get a deeper understanding of what it is that DEA does throughout the division, which includes northern and central Illinois, and then all of Wisconsin and all of Indiana. We'll talk about a wider range of topics from drug enforcement and drug prevention and education, and just the real impact that opioid and fentanyl poisoning epidemic that's had on our communities. We've interviewed special agents, high school students and teachers, and parents who lost loved ones. What do you hope that people take away from the podcast?
So I'd say number one, that we care. That DEA is comprised of people first, and then police. We're mothers and fathers, sisters, brothers who have chosen public service because we feel the real impact of drug use and drug-related violence, both personally and professionally, every day. We work hard to share what we know with others. We care about educating the youth so they make good decisions and stay healthy. That's number one. Number two, I would say we hope that our message is also resounding with those who are peddling this poison in our communities, that you will not be outside of our reach. We will work tirelessly, as we always have, in order to identify people that are trafficking in these dangerous drugs in this terrible time.
I'd say forgive us that in the background, we are in Chicago. So you might pick up on various sounds of first responders just working to save lives. So we'll do our best to edit that out. But if not, it'll make it into the final cut and you'll get just a raw version of this podcast.
Sure. And I could caveat that sometimes that's what you hear often as you're working in a community in order to make it better.
Before we dive into each of those areas, it'd really be great just for people that are listening to get to know who you are. I know you've had an impressive career spanning decades. Just me getting to know you, I know just the places and stations that you've been, Bulgaria, Mexico, Afghanistan. First and foremost, I know you've called yourself a proud daughter of Chicago. So let's start there. Tell me about just your background and maybe your upbringing and your Chicago roots.
Sure. Yeah, I'm born and raised south of the city of Chicago. My parents were immigrants. I have 3 sisters and a brother, and we were raised that your work ethic will be your reputation. So we saw firsthand from as long as I can remember that hard work matters and people depend on you, and you owe it to yourself to do your best work, and you owe it to others to support them in whatever work it is they do. I was educated here throughout the state of Illinois. I went to college down in central Illinois, and I'm a proud Bradley Brave, by the way. I'm going to throw that out there.
Go Braves.
And, I've just really always liked helping people. I think maybe sometimes birth order matters, and I'm in the middle of my family dynamic, and learned really early that bringing people together and bridging gaps, as they say, matters. Listening to people, showing them you care about them, goes far. And that establishment of relationships augments good things when challenging times occur. I really think I learned all of that growing up. And then when I became a public servant, I think I chose correctly in that the skills that I had learned, I was going to be able to bring in helping other people in not only the policing part of what we do at DEA, but also in the sharing, the education, the prevention, the protection in lifestyle and choices. I think that all kind of came from being in a city that loves its people, takes care of its surrounding, and works very hard to be the best that it can be.
So now let's talk about the DEA. And I know you had I wouldn't say not traditional start, but often when we hear about DEA's agents, more often than not, you hear they were a state trooper or they were a cop somewhere or something like that. But you started in a different field in the DEA, correct?
Yeah. So traditionally, that is true. Most DEA agents, historically, especially back when I started, which was in the 90s, I'm really old, had law enforcement or military backgrounds. That is still a very popular background for DEA applicants, but not at all mandated or necessitated in the application process anymore. Listen, I was in college. I was studying international law and international studies and foreign language, and my goal was to become a lawyer, join the United Nations, and save the world. That wasn't very practical because in my senior year, I realized how expensive further education was going to be. I was paying and had paid for my own college education, and so I thought, I'm going to have to get a job first, then go to law school. So there was a career day at my university, and all of the three-letter agencies were there and many other government offerings. And so I took all the information from every agency, and I applied to many of them, most of them really. And DEA was the first one to reach out to me. And at the time, they offered me a position as an intelligence analyst, and that's the job that is an unsung hero of a job in DEA. You help the agents put the pieces of the puzzle together in an investigation in order to solidify a case against somebody who's trafficking in drugs and successfully bring it to a prosecutable case. And so that's how I started with DEA. They hired me first as an intelligence analyst. That was the title back then. Now they're called intelligence research specialists. And it brought me to an understanding of what I mentioned earlier, that I was definitely built for public service. I loved it from the minute I walked through the doors here in Chicago in 1992. The people I met, the passion with which they worked, the commitment to doing right by people, and the specific willingness to work hard in dangerous and violent environments in order to protect communities was palpable. And I just knew that I was in the right place.
Talk about what did the DEA look like, and what was the feel for it back then? I'd say compared to the DEA of today. And what I mean is, even now, you're just one of a handful of special agents in charge. That woman, female, and that's something that you've been very proud of, and helping other female law enforcement agents and executives with a mentorship role. So, what was that like, just coming up through the ranks as a female law enforcement agent and professional?
Yeah. I'm very proud to be in the position I'm in now. I'm very proud to have 32 years of federal law enforcement, specifically drug law enforcement and public service But back to my upbringing, I came from a strong community of women who just got it done. I never really realized that I was a minority until I was well into the beginning of my career as a federal employee. I just didn't come from a place or an upbringing where there were parameters put on what I was able to do. Everything kind of just was, if you want to do it, get at it and do it well. Back to what I was saying, the hard work that you do will be your reputation was always instilled in us as we were growing up. And so I kind of always just thought of myself as another employee with X amount of duties to complete. I took that seriously. I think I worked hard to do it well and to share what I know with people along the way. And definitely to be a female who mentored other females. Because when I first started, there were not many females in executive positions. There were, and many of them were very impressive, good mentors to me. Some were not purposefully, but because back then the phrase being one of the guys sometimes meant something a little bit different than just kind of being fairly evaluated. It kind of meant that you stepped away from your feminine qualities a little bit. And that sometimes led to female law enforcement officers not always bolstering and supporting each other in an effort to fit in. That's changed dramatically. And now I'm proud to say that with many females in executive positions, there is no end to the amount of mentoring and camaraderie and professionalism that I think that we bring to the positions we hold.
You talked about fitting in. I've had a chance to observe our special response team on several occasions during training, and they're fantastic female special agents on that team that are, rough and tumble, that they just hanging in there. And talking about fitting in, with our SRT, it's just an awesome thing to see.
Yeah, there's female special response team members throughout DEA now. I'm very proud of the SRT members that we have here in the Chicago Field Division. They augment operations fantastically, and with a passion and a prowess and a willingness that's noteworthy. I think anything you want to do, you can do. You just have to put your mind to it. That might sound simple, and it's not. I've had miles and miles of challenges along the road in my career. That said, not giving up and not giving in is key, no matter who you are, where you're from, or what your choice of profession is. Not giving in, not giving up, refusing to let yourself lose to the mental self-doubt that everybody goes through, I think is key.
Talk about those challenges, and you mentioned a 32-year career with the DEA. What have been some of the most memorable moments or assignments or missions over the course of 32 years?
Ooh, that's a big one. There have been many good ones, lots of sad ones, a number of bad ones. That's a big question. But I guess for today's purposes, I'll kind of summarize it in that all of my best days were the times that we as groups of people or teams left a place better than we found it. Whether it was a neighborhood here in the city of Chicago, working cases many, many times throughout Indiana and Wisconsin, partnering with all of our state and local partners, in other cases throughout the country. I've worked international cases and seen successes that have helped communities in the foreign arena as well as here. Those are the things that matter when you know that you made a difference and that somebody or someplace is just a little bit safer because you were there. That's the stuff that stays with me.
So going back on, start 1992 was your first year?
Yeah.
92. So how has the drug threat evolved from, I know right now it's no secret, main priority is targeting the drug trafficking networks and the criminal organizations that are trafficking fentanyl, biggest driver of all drug overdose deaths. So targeting those networks and those cartels and their partners. That's now, how have you seen it evolve from the 90s fast forward to what we're dealing with today?
Well, so two ways. First is the traditional, I guess would be a word I could use, ebb and flow of drug types and drug usage throughout the decades that I've been with DEA, from cocaine kingpins to the scourge of fentanyl that we see today. There is a deliberate and intentional interest by the drug trafficking organizations in order to sell whatever people want to buy at any given time. So the decades change, but the question as to what and why in terms of people's demand for drugs and drug use is an ever-present question. It's why DEA intelligence is some of the best in the federal system, because that information matters. It matters to use that data to target and identify the biggest, baddest drug traffickers, but it also helps to use that data to educate our youth so they make good decisions, to educate families, to educate anyone who will listen on the dangers of drug use, drug misuse, and the fact that modern day drugs are as dangerous as they've ever been. But the second point I want to make is the biggest change that I've seen in my career would be the use of social media to have access to drugs, right? Back when I started back in the 90s, if you wanted to get some drugs, you needed to find a guy that knew a guy that would vouch for you to another person that may have some drugs to sell. Almost all of those steps included a personal interaction, either in an actual face-to-face or at the very least a telephone call of some description. These days, you can jump online, type in the type of drug you want, and with just a little bit of work and maybe one of the pay
or an emoji even,
exactly. You can have that drug delivered to your door and never have met anybody. It's a terrible evolution in an already bad problem.
And I know we're both parents. You have boys, I have boys, and various ages, but really, really scary just to see now how accessible, like you said, you had to go to some really seedy places or have the right connections if you really wanted to get your hands on drugs. But now just on social media, how accessible, especially with, with the young adult teen demographic, just how at risk. And really, you hear so many stories. I mean, it can literally happen to anybody, like any parent. There's no one parent who's more protected than another, really, when it comes to this.
No, there is no boundary, no zip code, no cultural identifier that cares about the scourge of fentanyl and all of the related dangerous drugs that we are seeing as emerging threats in 2024. And it's like nothing I've ever seen. And young people do need to know that one pill can kill. That is not just a catchphrase for DEA. That's a fact. I say it all the time to my sons who are college age. One pill can kill. It's some really simple education, but then you put context to it and you share the stories. I think you have to be frank with kids. I think dancing around the subject is not a healthy approach. And so I love sitting down with people and talking about what these poor decisions can really end up looking like.
And I think those conversations are evolving compared to at least when I was in school and we had DARE. I think back then there's an element of fear, right? Fear and sometimes one-way direction of speaking. And you see nowadays just kids, teens are much smarter than we were, right? They have much more access to information than we ever did. And they want to be included in those conversations. They want to have those conversations. And they're open to it. I think they're just more inquisitive. They want to know why things are the way they are. And they're willing to have those conversations. They're asking for them. I think talking to high school students, they're glad that now the topic is becoming more prevalent inside of the classroom before just getting glossed over. Sometimes it's a philosophy of like, it doesn't happen in our school, but now we're seeing kids like the group from
Stevenson
High School, yeah, where they really pushed their school and is really so proactive and pushing for change and pushing for dialogue and awareness around this amongst their demographic.
Yeah. The young ladies from that high school who I've had the pleasure of meeting with a couple of times have truly taken ownership of what youth can do to educate youth, peer-to-peer education on the dangers of illicit drug use and all that entails. I think they have done a great job in being champions for that type of educational cause, and we need more of it. We need more of it everywhere. We need to be screaming it from the mountaintops that this is real and that the danger has never been more prevalent, because you just don't know what you're going to get if you take a drug that hasn't been prescribed for you by a doctor and dispensed to you by a reputable, legitimate pharmacy. It's just that simple. Stay away from it.
So we are in Chicago. Chicago, no secret, major distribution hub, major center for illicit drug activity and trafficking. Thankfully, we have some fantastic partners on the law enforcement front at the state level, at the local level, even not just here in Chicago, but in Wisconsin and Indiana as well. Talk about how important is that to have, obviously we're the feds, right? We are the feds, we're DEA, but how vital, important is it to have and maintain these strong relationships with our local law enforcement partners?
Well, it's key. Simply put, we don't get anything done unless we really work with our state, local, federal prosecuting partners. And yeah, we're the feds. But, I laugh when I think about that, because when I first became an agent and I was assigned to Phoenix, Arizona, I was assigned to a Phoenix PD task force group. And so a lot of my initial interactions in the communities was as a Fed assigned to a local PD task force. And that taught me real fast that the majority of what you do in policing is engage with the public. You talk to people.
Yeah.
You're out there. You're listening. You're understanding the community that you're working in. That became key because, again, that builds trust. And it creates a camaraderie between both the police and the community. So when you're interacting and you're helping, you see that there's so many pieces of an individual, of an organization, or of a team, and you work all that together. Within Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana, the relationships we have with our hundreds of task force officer partner sheriff's offices and police departments and state police entities and county brotherhoods is probably one of the most important things we do to be strong enough to affect change in our communities. We're not big enough to maintain the presence throughout our communities if we don't work with our state, local, and federal partners.
And these they're the ones really that they're on the front lines as well. They're just as much in, say, harm's way or on the front lines of these investigations as our special agents are, right?
If not more so.
Right.
Yes. Every single law enforcement officer that works in a community is equally vulnerable to the violence that comes from it, at the very least, from drug-related violence. Yep. But violence in general is a part of our job. We do a dangerous job, and we train and we train and we train, but sometimes things go poorly or things go really bad. And that's a time when everybody suffers.
Yeah, really. I mean, unfortunately, we've had to attend a few memorial services of fallen brothers and sisters at the Chicago Police Department. So, we're always there, really supporting one another in times of need.
Absolutely. I've stood at altogether too many wakes and funerals for police officers, both foreign and domestic, and definitely local friends and partners that I have lost along the way. That's never a good part of the job.
Let's shift gears just a bit. So the timing right now, we're actually filming this episode right in the middle of Red Ribbon Week. And if you're in the Chicago area or even across state lines in Indiana, you look northwest, you'll see the skyline. So many thanks to our partners in the community who have lit red and just really done their part to help us celebrate Red Ribbon Week. And then this weekend will be the National Prescription Drug Take Back Day. So these are pretty much our two pillars of engagement that have been going on for years. Red Ribbon Week going back to the 80s and really coming off of Special Agent Camarena and his death, and just following that, the pledge to really engage our communities in a to promote drug-free lifestyle, and then Take Back Day twice a year, offering the public a chance to dispose of their unneeded medications. So obviously, over the course of 32 years, you've seen many iterations and versions and celebrations and just ways. What do these types of events mean for DEA when it comes to raising awareness and giving the public a chance to get involved in what we do?
Well, I think you touched on it when you used the word pillars, and I would expound on that by saying I think these two events, especially Red Ribbon Week, they're foundational to who we are and what we do at DEA. Back in 1992, when I started here in Chicago, the person who trained me had worked with Kiki Camarena in Guadalajara prior to his kidnapping, torture, and murder by the drug cartel in Mexico. Those stories have stayed with me throughout my career. Those stories are a part of the spark that ignites the passion in every DEA employee as they do their job each day. That's real. And I'm very, very proud at how Red Ribbon Week and the splashing of red to remember has evolved throughout the last 3 decades. It's fantastic. Last night I was driving down Michigan Avenue, and to see the red splash throughout the city of Chicago made me so proud. It gave me pause, but mostly made me very proud of who we are and what we do. I know the same things are occurring and will continue to occur for the rest of the week throughout multiple places in Indiana and Wisconsin. And that's all thanks to community partners and policing partners and corporate partners that care. We now make sure that our narrative is out there, and therefore people know who we are. They know that DEA stands for Drug Enforcement Administration. They know that they know what we do, and our goal is to continue to increase that education piece. Take back it's another one. It's something that since 2010 DEA has stood strongly on. The fact that people's expired or unneeded medication could potentially be diverted and dangerously misused is really, really important. So since 2010, we've been having these take-back events that have been enormously successful in removing thousands of pounds per location, per event, per year of unwanted medications that can then be safely destroyed and therefore not hurt somebody.
And we're talking about like medication that your doctor gave you. So, for example, you had a root canal and had some pain medicine, right, or a surgery, or even just over the counter that might be, it's long forgotten about. It's in that back drawer. It's in the back of that drawer or in your medicine cabinet. But again, it's a way to eliminate that risk of someone else getting their hands on it, somebody else who may be dealing with a misuse or abuse issue, or even children getting access. Just a really safe way to dispose of that. And we've data has shown that a lot of the addiction and misuse issues stem from misuse of prescribed medication. So it's a really great initiative that we have. So this podcast, we've already interviewed several other folks for future episodes. There's one episode that we focus on drug-induced homicide investigations. And that's when a mother, father, someone loses a loved one, whether it's a son or daughter or a family member. And often they're just in a lot of pain and grief that will never go away. And then eventually you see that grief kind of shift toward a pursuit of justice. And we've worked with a lot of these parents to do what we can to lend our resources or get directly involved in these investigations. And we've had tremendous success in bringing charges, working with our prosecutorial partners and bringing charges against the drug dealer who distributed that drug that led to an overdose death. And another episode is on the new fentanyl education. It's a public act now. It was a bill, and now it's an official act where, beginning with this school year, every high school health class will learn about the dangers of fentanyl. So what do you hope that people who are listening take away from each of those stories, just based on your interaction with those parents who have shared their stories with you, knowing the work that our agents have done in bringing, delivering justice, and then just again on the education front, dealing with students and educators that want to be involved?
Sure. So two critically important topics. The first one, the agents throughout this field division and throughout DEA work tirelessly to help state and local partners anytime they can to identify those who would want to do others harm, right, by selling drugs. So anytime we can help, we will help. That's what partnerships are for. That's why they matter, is so you know to come together, so all of the information can be looked at in these cases, which can be very complex. But we've had a lot of successes in bringing all the right people together, to include a prosecuting authority, in order to look at all the information, put together an analysis of the evidence, and move forward when there's a case to be made on these drug traffickers who purposely would distribute something that is counterfeit and therefore maybe cause a death. That's number one. And number two, I'm very proud that DEA contributed to the data that was used to pass the Illinois legislation of mandating fentanyl education throughout the public school system. There's nothing more important than making sure that young people know about the scourge of fake pills. Again, that one pill can kill, that this is serious, that you need to educate yourself so you can make the best choices when these challenges confront you, because they will as a young person. Statistically, they will confront you as a young person. So be armed with the education, be forewarned that your decision is what matters, and be brave. You're not alone in this.
Boss, I want to thank you so much. When growing up and even through now, I just never really saw that level of access that the public had with DEA or DEA special agent in charge or anybody. I think across the agency, we're all just doing a really great job in pushing the message and getting, becoming more visible and engaging. So hopefully this is just another vehicle for us to interact with and engage, our communities. So really want to thank you for taking the time, and you'll be back. I know as we continue planning new, future episodes and future ideas. You might be sitting in this chair interviewing somebody else. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Happy to be here. Always happy to share what we know, who we are, what we do, and the importance of DEA's messaging, DEA's mission, and DEA's commitment to saving American lives and protecting our communities.
All right, so that does it for the first episode of the DEA Chicago Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the conversation and access that we provided to Special Agent in Charge Lyons. Next few episodes, we'll be speaking with parents who lost loved ones due to a fentanyl poisoning. And we'll also speak with a special agent from Indianapolis whose team investigated those deaths and helped deliver justice for those families. We'll also address the new bill, the new mandatory fentanyl education that's being required in all high schools throughout Illinois. We spoke with high school students, past and present. We also spoke with a high school teacher who introduced fentanyl education in a unique way in his classroom, and other Chicago public school officials on how they're implementing fentanyl education in the classroom. For the DEA Chicago Podcast, I'm Luis Agostini.